Good morning. My name is Christoph Heusgen and I'm the German ambassador to the United Nations. Today we commemorate the worst crime that was committed on European soil since World War II. This crime reminds us of the responsibility of the United Nations to protect civilians when governments can't do it. Germany, in the month of July, holds the presidency of the Security Council, and for us, human rights, conflict prevention, humanitarian issues are on the top of our agenda. We discuss the results of COVID-19 on the population. We discuss what climate change means. We have on our agenda sexual violence in conflict. We had a discussion already on peacekeeping operations and the need for the protection of human rights. And right now, today, we are on the final day of very difficult negotiations to continue the possibility of the United Nations to deliver humanitarian aid to the north of Syria. Today, our event is co-organized with colleagues from Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Estonia, France, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and the delegation of the European Union. We are very glad to have so many high-ranking speakers participating here in New York, and I would like to especially welcome Mr. Tijani Mohamed Bande, the President of the General Assembly, Adama Dieng, the Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide, and Ms. Amina Kravach, Director of the War Childhood Museums. And we are also very glad that among the many speakers, and we thank all speakers for participating today, we have among them today the President of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have Michael Roth, the Minister of State for Europe and in the German Federal Foreign Office, and the Chair of the European Union General Affairs Council. And we have Thomas Byrne, the Minister for European Affairs in Ireland. I would like to end my start and to begin my moderation by thanking Global Virtual Solutions for providing their platform hybridity for today's event. And I would like, in this context, express my special gratitude to Estonia and to my colleague, the Ambassador of Estonia here in New York. I would now like to give the floor to the President of the 74th session of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Tijani Mohamed Bande.
Thank you very much, Chairman of the occasion, and my dear friend, Ambassador Christoph Heusgen, Mr. Safik Defervik, with the Chairman of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Mr. Michael Ross, Minister of State for Europe at the German Federal Office and the Chair of the European Union General Affairs Council, and the Minister the Minister from Ireland, Mr. Adama Dieng, Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide, Ms. Amina Kravach, Director of the War Childhood Museum, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I thank the organizers of this sober event commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Srebrenica massacre. 25 years ago, the people of Srebrenica experienced an unimaginable horror. Today and every day, we remember the innocent boys and men who suffered heinous and unjustifiable death. We stand in solidarity with their families who have epitomized courage and resilience in seeking justice and peace throughout a quarter of a century of profound grief. Excellencies, the United Nations failed to protect the people of Srebrenica. The events of July 1995 changed the course of how the organization responds to atrocities. The genocide against Bosnian Muslims in Srebrenica will never be forgotten. However, despite its initial failure, the organization has sought justice for the victims of the Srebrenica massacre through the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Moreover, in November 1998, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 53/35, which requested a comprehensive report, including an assessment on the events dating from 16 April 1993 to 15 December 1995. These actions will not bring back the boys and men of Srebrenica. However, these steps serve as a permanent reminder that we have a responsibility to protect civilians everywhere. For a crime against humanity, it's a crime against all of humanity. It's important to stress that the public expectation of the role of the United Nations relating to what role it can play on the ground is frequently associated with the ability of the organization to react promptly to avoid worst-case scenarios. We, therefore, as an organization, must continue our efforts to counter and address negative narratives that could fuel genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Prevention is key. We must act to prevent mass atrocities from happening in the first place. Developing appropriate instruments and mechanisms to detect early situations of concern is vital in this regard. Diplomacy must be our first and best option. We need to reactivate and recommit to our early warning mechanisms, especially as the crimes of genocide do not happen without red flags. It is our collective responsibility to be aware and to respond to this, to be aware of and to respond to these signals. Without a doubt, Excellencies, prevention is also the key to pay tribute to the victims and survivors of hate and brutality. The United Nations system has the appropriate instruments to act early on situations of serious and systematic violation of human rights that may lead to genocide, such as the one witnessed in Srebrenica. Excellencies, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide remains one of the milestones of multilateralism linked to the very existence of the United Nations. The international community must renew its promise to stop genocide. Achieving universal ratification of the Convention is vital for this. In this regard, I join all others who have routinely and insistently over the years highlighted the need for member states to ratify the Convention. I also wish to reiterate the call by the Secretary General for ceasefire in all conflict zones amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Excellencies, today we join millions in paying tribute to all the victims of this heinous crime. I would like to reiterate that the global community will never forget them. They will always be at the center of determination not to repeat the mistakes of the past and to build societies and a world in which rights of all are upheld and promoted. I thank you.
I thank the President of the 74th session of the General Assembly, Mr. Tijani Mohamed Bande, for his statement, and it's now my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Adama Dieng, the Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the prevention of genocide. Adama, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear colleagues, brothers and sisters in humanity. I would like to begin by sincerely thanking the organizers of this poignant and important commemoration event. It is with much humility that today we pay tribute to all those who, 25 years ago, were victims of cruelty, inhumanity, and ultimately the most heinous crime, the crime of genocide. Today, we are meeting to pay tribute and pay our respects to all those who lost their lives in the summer of 1995. They believed that they were safe in a protected enclave, yet when that protection was needed the most, it was not provided. When we at the United Nations remember Srebrenica, we do so with much humility and regret, as we acknowledge the failure of the international community, including our own organization, to prevent this tragedy. The lives of the victims of Srebrenica must be honored and remembered. The grief that the loss of those lives generated will be felt for generations. Let me say very clearly that what happened in Srebrenica is not only about dealing with the past, it is about dealing with the present and about dealing with the future. Victims' suffering never ends, and neither should our embrace of their cause. 2 years ago, I had the honor of visiting the mothers of Srebrenica at the Potachari Memorial Center. On that occasion, I stood with them in fields that have witnessed unbearable suffering. I traveled to Srebrenica to honor the mothers' fights for justice and pay tribute to their fathers, their brothers, their husbands, their sons, and in some cases, their entire families. The mother's voice is the voice of those who can no longer speak. They remain a source of inspiration for us all. Memorializing past events is about acknowledging what happened and telling victims' relatives and friends that they have a unique contribution to make to the future of their country and to the entire humanity. Yet, some continue to question that the events of 25 years ago constituted genocide. This is in spite of the verdicts by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the International Court of Justice, and national courts. Genocide denial sows fear, mistrust, and war criminals into heroes. It constitutes an affront to reconciliation and poisons the future of children before they can even be aware. We must counter these tendencies strongly. All political leaders and all people in a position of influence must combat negative rhetoric with words of compassion and empathy toward the pain and suffering of their neighbors. Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear colleagues, to me, remembering what happened in Srebrenica also constitute an imperative to prevent the commission of such crimes in the future. The commitment not to forget and the commitment to prevent are two sides of the same coin. At the United Nations, reflections on the failure to prevent what happened in Srebrenica and Rwanda led to the establishment of the position of Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. Many of the risk indicators that we use today globally are informed by the lessons that we learn from the events that preceded the Srebrenica genocide. Member states also reflected on this and other collective failures in a process that years later led to the unanimous adoption of the responsibility to protect. Today, the call for prevention is alive in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In spite of concerning dynamics that question the tragedies of the past and inflict hatred in the present, an entire generation of peacemakers is ready to work tirelessly to build a future where peace and reconciliation prevail. I'm proud of having met a number of them, from the local leaders who built a joint memorial in Jepse, to the mayors of Sarajevo and East Sarajevo, who brought the Youth Olympics and the Olympic flame back to the city. From 3 former military commanders in Maklach, who fought each other during the war and are now joining forces in support of reconciliation to the long-term educational work of the Sarajevo War Childhood Museum. Perhaps I found no higher hopes than those expressed to me by the students at a high school in Yatse, at the heart of the country, who refused to accept segregation in defiance of an entire educational system that perpetuates division. They imagined a world without segregation and acted upon their own vision. When I spoke to them in their own classroom, I was energized by the questions that replicated points that I had also heard from other young people across the country. They all shared the same aim, the aim of putting light on forgotten situations, the aim of solving problems to make the world a better place, the aim of moving forward and never backwards, the aim of dreaming what is possible instead of accepting what seems inevitable. The fire in their hearts was not a fire of destruction. It was a fire of enthusiasm and energy to pursue their aspiration to live together in peace. This message from a humble classroom at the heart of Bosnia and Herzegovina resonates throughout the world. These students' objective must be unequivocally our own, to work towards a world free of hate and division, in which crimes such as the one that were committed in Srebrenica no longer happen, a world that has learned the lessons of the past, and a world where communities can live together in peace and dignity, as it is their inherent right. The victims of Srebrenica deserve no less. Let us never deviate from this solemn commitment in service of their just cause. I thank you.
I thank Mr. Adama Dieng, the Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide, and I now give the floor to Ms. Amina Kravac, the Director of the World Childhood Museums. You have the floor.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor to be a part of today's event commemorating the genocide in Srebrenica. Atrocities of such magnitude are a blatant attack on humankind, and it is striking that something so abominable happened just 25 years ago at the heart of a continent which prided itself as a bastion of peace, security, and prosperity. When we look at the world today, can we feel reassured that we have learned lessons from Srebrenica? I think there are reasons to be skeptical about it. It is true that today we have new tools and mechanisms like the principle of responsibility to protect, which we didn't have at the time. However, we still see oftentimes a dismal mismatch between the vigor with which lofty principles are declared on the one hand and the rather feeble application of those principles when they are most needed. In my capacity as Executive Director at the War Childhood Museum in Sarajevo, I have had the chance and the privilege to meet and work with survivors of war in Srebrenica who were children at the time of the genocide. These incredible human beings faced extreme adversity and went through unimaginable experiences, and yet managed to do something extraordinary, managed to achieve something extraordinary. The vast majority of them managed to preserve faith in humanity, managed to preserve hope for a better future for generations to come. Many of these brave people show great levels of resilience and are fully functional members of society today. They have managed to develop different coping mechanisms and to overcome unimaginable challenges. What is even more remarkable, none of the child survivors of genocide I had ever have a chance to talk to have let hatred define their existence. If I were to identify a common trait a recurrent trait among child survivors of genocide. It is their longing for closure. Besides seeing that war criminals are brought to justice, closure for the majority of them means finding the remains of their loved ones. Finding and burying the bones of fathers, brothers, uncles, and other family members finally brings a long-awaited peace of mind to survivors. Alas, to this day, too many of them are still looking for remains which are scattered around in primary, secondary, and even tertiary mass graves. The need for closure is experienced and expressed by war-affected children in general, and it is an important aspect of the work of the War Childhood Museum. In fact, the very idea of the museum stemmed from our determination to help war-affected children to find closure and process difficult past experiences. Nowadays, the War Childhood Museum is a global platform for all those whose childhoods have been affected by an armed conflict anywhere in the world to share and exchange their stories and experiences. Through sharing, they embark on a healing journey where they face, often for the first time, difficult past experiences and eventually come to terms with them. As a part of this complex psychological process, each of them leaves behind a memento of their past, an object that may have been carrying for years. And this act of leaving it at the museum is a way of symbolically lightening the burdens of those memories. Once they become part of the museum's collection, these personal belongings and accounts provide a wider audience with an insight of what war-affected childhood is from children's perspective and in all its complexity. Because of this focus of personal experiences of children, the museum is uniquely positioned to offer narratives that transcend ethno-national divides and may play a very important role in the reconciliation process and dealing with a difficult past. An extraordinary example of how children can indeed serve as effective interpreters and witnesses of their time is the case of Anne Frank. There we see how the diary of a girl has the power to capture and epitomize the very essence of humanity's darkest times and provide humankind with a shared collective memory in a way that no history book or war crime trial can. We should continue listening and learning from the experiences of children like Anne or like Sabina. Sabina was 9 years old during the genocide in Srebrenica. The last time she saw her father alive, she gave him a parting gift, a small toy that could fit his pocket. 8 years later, Sabina received a call. They believed that the remains of her father might be in one of the mass graves. And so, at the age of 17, Sabina identified her father by finding that very childhood toy still intact in his pocket. These powerful stories of children challenge and force us to face the full scale and impact of the atrocities beyond number and statistical data. Putting a name and a face to each of the reported numbers may be an effective tool, possibly the most effective tool we have for fighting revisionism and dehumanization, be it in respect of the genocide in Srebrenica or any other atrocity committed elsewhere. And by countering revisionist impulses, we lay the foundation for a shared understanding of the past, which is a precondition for starting a path of genuine reconciliation. And we shall let that path be illuminated by the child survivors who have learned to live without hatred. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the President of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, His Excellency Mr. Šefčovič Javirović.
Poštovani predsjedavajući, Vaše ekscelencije, dame i gospodo. Zahvaljujem se na pozivu da se obratim povodom obilježavanja 25. godišnjice genocida u Srebrenici, nekadašnjoj zaštićenoj zoni Ujedinjenih nacija. Genocid u Srebrenici je najveći zločin koji je počinjen na europskom tlu poslije Drugog svjetskog rata. Po svojim razmjerima i monstruoznim oblicima izvršenja, ovaj zločin je ostavio duboke rane koje još uvijek nisu zacijelile. Više od 8.000 ljudi je za samo par dana pobijeno. Njihova tijela odvožena su kamionima na mjesta gdje su bagerima zakopavana u masovne grobnice. Neki među njima su sahranjeni živi, neki su bili maloljetni dječaci, nemilosrdno otimani od svojih majki pred kapijama baze holandskog bataljona UN-ovih snaga u Potočarima. Srebrenički muškarci i dječaci likvidirani su sa rukama vezanim žicom dok su stajali bespomoćni u redovima ispred streljačkih vodova vojske Republike Srpske. Da bi sakrili tragove, zločinci su kasnije otkopavali tijela iz masovnih grobnica te ih premještali u sekundarne, a zatim i u tercijalne masovne grobnice. Bila je to zastrašujuća industrija smrti, lišena svake milosti, saosjećanja i poštovanja prema ljudskim bićima. Bio je to genocid u svom punom smislu. Iako se njegov najintenzivniji dio provodio u par dana jula 1995. godine, genocid u Srebrenici se ne može ograničiti samo na taj kratki vremenski period. Navedeni dani nakon pada Srebrenice bili su samo završetak genocidnog procesa koji je započeo sa masovnim ubistvima 1992. godine te se nastavio višegodišnjom opsadom Srebreničke enklave i teroriziranjem njenog stanovništva. Upravo zbog toga ju je Vijeće sigurnosti 1993. godine proglasilo zaštićenom zonom Ujedinjenih nacija 2 godine prije njenog konačnog pada. U Srebrenici nisu pobijeni samo ljudi iz Srebrenice. U Srebrenici su pobijeni Bošnjaci sa čitavog područja istočne Bosne, iz Zvornika, Bratunca, Vlastenice, Milića i drugih mjesta, bježeći od masovnih progona utočište, svi oni su bili našli u Srebreničkoj enklavi. Dame i gospodo, genocid u Srebrenici bio je pažljivo osmišljena operacija koju su izvršile vojne i civilne institucije vlasti samoproglašene Republike Srpske. Kao što je potvrđeno u presudama međunarodnih sudova, to nije bio nikakav nepredvidivi incident neodgovornih pojedinaca ili grupa, navodno motiviranih željom za osvetom, već pažljivo osmišljeni velikodržavni projekat ostvaren s ciljem uklanjanja bošnjačkog naroda sa čitavog područja istočne Bosne, kako bi na tom okrvavljenom tlu živio samo srpski narod. U tu svrhu pobijene su čitave porodice, prekinute su višestoljetne porodične loze, a mnogi koji su preživjeli pakao Srebrenice nikada se više nisu mogli vratiti u svoje domove. Zbog snažne zavjere šutnje kod počinilaca koji i dalje ne žele progovoriti gdje su masovne grobnice, značajan dio porodica nikada nije pronašao posmrtne ostatke svojih najmilijih. Mnoge majke još uvijek i 25 godina poslije tragaju za kostima svoje djece uz jedinu želju da ih dostojno sahrane. S obzirom da je genocid počinjen u zaštićenoj zoni Ujedinjenih nacija, to je bio nezapamćen udar na kredibilitet ove organizacije. Postavilo se pitanje da li UN ima spremnost da ispunjava ono na što se obavezao prilikom svog osnivanja 1945. godine. Samo 50 godina nakon što je rečeno nikad više, dogodilo se ponovo. Najviši zvaničnici Ujedinjenih nacija priznali su da Ujedinjene nacije nisu učinile svoj dio posla kako bi spasile narod Srebrenice, podsjećajući da su strašni zločini vršeni pred očima vojnika UN-a i da su članice Vijeća sigurnosti zakazale, iako su bile u stanju da spriječe zločin. Postavilo se pitanje kako da narodi širom svijeta vjeruju da su zaštićeni međunarodnim pravom od prijetnje i strpljenjem, ako to pravo nije važilo u zaštićenoj zoni UN-a u Bosni i Hercegovini. Radom Haškog tribunala, koji je osnovan odlukom Vijeća sigurnosti UN-a, ostvaren je dio pravde koja je poslužila kao djelimična utjeha žrtvama i preživjelima. Na stranicama haških presuda zapisana je istina, a dio zločinaca je kažnjen, što je bilo od izuzetne važnosti kao poruka da postoji samo jedna istina i da zločin ne smije proći nekažnjeno. Nažalost, zvaničnici BiH entiteta Republika Srpska, kao i zvaničnici susjedne Srbije, beskompromisno gaze i taj mali dio pravde, provodeći kampanju aktivnog negiranja presuda Haškog tribunala i Međunarodnog suda pravde, kojima je utvrđena istina o genocidu. U institucijama se veličaju ratni zločinci osuđeni za genocid, čime se vrijeđaju žrtve i potpiruje nepovjerenje među narodima u Bosni i Hercegovini, da se ponovo podriva sigurnost naše zemlje. Koristim ovu priliku da pozovem članice Vijeća sigurnosti UN-a da zaštite integritet sudova Ujedinjenih nacija te osiguraju poštivanje njihovih presuda, naročito u vezi sa genocidom u Srebrenici. Nužno je odmah donijeti zakon o zabrani negiranja genocida. To u ovom trenutku može uraditi jedino visoki predstavnik međunarodne zajednice u Bosni i Hercegovini, u skladu sa svojim mandatom utemeljenim Daytonskim mirovnim sporazumom. Donošenje i implementacija takvog zakona predstavljali bi najbolji izraz poštovanja prema žrtvama te najveću moguću pomoć svima nama u Bosni i Hercegovini da se na temelju istine izgradi povjerenje potrebno za sigurnu i svijetlu budućnost u koju čvrsto vjerujem.
I thank the President of the Presidency of Bosnia-Herzegovina for his speech, and I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Michael Roth, the Minister of State for Europe at the German Federal Foreign Office and Chair of the European Union General Affairs Council.
Thank you, Ambassador, Presidents, distinguished colleagues, Excellencies. 25 years ago, in the far east of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the worst war crime on European soil since World War II took its course, the genocide in Srebrenica. In the days following 11th of July, women and children were persecuted and raped, and thousands of defenseless boys and men were systematically sorted out, murdered, and buried, all because they were Bosnian Muslims. The atrocities in Srebrenica are a particularly dark chapter in the wars and conflicts that transformed the former Yugoslavia into a huge battlefield. Today we are commemorating the 25th anniversary of this genocide. Srebrenica has become the epitome of the collective failure of the international community. The killing took place before the very eyes of the United Nations and the entire world. The international community, with its blue helmets stationed in the region, was unable to protect civilians and stop the murderous troops of General Ratko Mladic. Srebrenica marks not only a low point, but also a turning point for the international community's responsibility to protect. This is why it's so important to commemorate Srebrenica in an international forum as we are doing today. The Srebrenica genocide has changed the way that we see our responsibility for peace in our neighborhood, our role in international conflicts, and how military means should be used for peacekeeping and protecting civilians. To this day, a quarter of a century later, the atrocities have left deep wounds. Families are still looking for the remains of their loved ones. Graves are still being discovered. On Sunday, 8 victims will finally be laid to rest by their families at the memorial site. At the same time, accountability is still a burning issue. Despite the important work of the international courts, we must acknowledge not all perpetrators have been brought to justice. It's very important that countries in the region redouble their efforts to hold them accountable for their crimes. While the international courts in The Hague have been very clear in classifying the crimes committed in Srebrenica as genocide, some actors in the region still refuse to accept this. In so doing, they stand in the way of reconciliation. Reconciliation begins with facing the facts. Better regional cooperation, dear ladies and gentlemen, contributes to reconciliation. In the framework of the Berlin process, the Western Balkans have made remarkable progress in this field since 2014. The heads of government in the Western Balkans agreed to finally open their archives and cooperate actively to clarify the fate of missing persons in the region. Yet we see persisting divisions in the Western Balkans. There are still many politicians who use inflammatory rhetoric and serve only their ethnic groups. Their actions divide rather than reconcile. This stands in stark contrast to declarations that their main foreign policy goal is for their country to become a member of the European Union. Let me be very frank. Those who play with the narratives of the past have not understood the spirit of the European Union. They hold society hostage to advance their own position, and they deny their fellow citizens legitimate aspirations to walk the path towards the European Union. There are, of course, also positive examples. One of my favorites, the students of the vocational school of Cajce in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The authorities wanted to divide its classes along ethnic lines, but the students refused to let that happen, and they succeeded. Another very positive example is the creation of RICO, the Regional Youth Cooperation Office. RICO brings together young people from across the region. They become ambassadors for a new spirit of cooperation and reconciliation. The future will be written by these young people. The last important initiative I would like to mention is the Recom Initiative, which focuses on establishing truth regarding the atrocities committed on the soil of the former Yugoslavia. This initiative, comprising thousands of NGOs from all over the region, is helping to shape a general understanding of what happened in the 1990s in the Western Balkans. I hope that all political leaders in the region will show the same courage as the people of these initiatives have done. May they, too, face up to the responsibility that arises from the past and stand up for reconciliation in the region. While reconciliation work needs to be done first and foremost in the region, the European Union also has to play a role. The Western Balkans are located within the European Union. Its future is with the European Union. The European Union won't be complete without all 6 Western Balkan states. We know this will not be an easy task. And to be honest, it can't be completed without reconciliation. But we have committed ourselves to the European perspective of the region, and I assure you that we will keep supporting the Western Balkans' path towards the European Union during the German EU Council presidency. As an elected member of the Security Council, Germany will remain a steadfast partner for and advocate of the protection of civilians. This cause and, more generally, the promotion of human rights remain at the core of our work. Today, we take pause and commemorate the victims of the Srebrenica genocide. We commemorate this knowing full well that the wounds have not healed and that the scars do still hurt. This reminds us of our responsibility to never let such an atrocity happen again. It reminds us of what we owe to the victims of the genocide in Srebrenica and to all other victims of the Yugoslav wars, regardless of their ethnicity. We must fight for a democratic and peaceful future, one in which each and every individual can live his or her life regardless of ethnic affiliation, nationality, or religious belief.
I thank Michael Roth, Minister of State for Europe at the German Federal Foreign Office, for his contribution, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Thomas Byrne, Minister for European Affairs of Ireland. You have the floor, Mr. Minister.
Thank you, Excellencies and colleagues. We gather here virtually today to mark the 25th anniversary of one of the worst atrocities to have occurred in Europe since the end of World War II. 25 years ago tomorrow, in the small city of Srebrenica in eastern Bosnia-Herzegovina, 8,000 unarmed men and boys were rounded up and systematically murdered solely on account of their Bosniak identity. The images and footage from Srebrenica are forever etched on the minds of my generation. The event represents a shameful episode in modern European history, the memory of which must never be allowed to be eradicated. Anyone who has visited Srebrenica will know how the pain and wounds of the evil acts perpetrated in that city are still all too fresh and alive for the families and friends of those murdered. This weekend in Srebrenica, more burials will take place of the innocent victims of that genocide. We said at the time, and following hard on the almost simultaneous tragedy of Rwanda, that this must never happen again. This must remain our goal, the only irrefutable lesson that we can draw from those terrible events. This determination to work to ensure that there can never be another Srebrenica is one which motivates all those who truly subscribe to multilateralism and international cooperation, based on the fundamental principles set out in the UN Charter. In order to prevent such crimes from recurring, we must ensure that perpetrators are held accountable, and I reaffirm Ireland's support for the International Criminal Court as a key actor in the fight against impunity. The memory of what happened in Srebrenica will certainly be a driving force for Ireland as we prepare to assume our elected membership of the Security Council commencing next January. Ireland, throughout our 65 years of United Nations membership, has always sought to be a voice advocating full respect for human rights, the upholding of international law, and dialogue and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. We share these values with our EU partners and with those member states we will have the privilege of serving on the Council. Ireland is a country which itself has known conflict and knows the challenges of building peace and promoting reconciliation. 22 years on from our historic Good Friday Agreement, the hard work of ending centuries of division and mistrust and bringing communities together still continues. As a Security Council member, Ireland will seek to draw on our own experience of conflict and on our long and distinguished record of service to UN peacekeeping to help the United Nations to promote those concepts: respect and protection of basic human rights, transitional justice, truth and reconciliation, conflict prevention, which are so important and key in the aftermath of atrocities such as Srebrenica. This year also marks the 25th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Accords, which have fashioned modern-day Bosnia-Herzegovina. The progress which Bosnia-Herzegovina has made over the past quarter century in building up its institutions of government and developing its economy and society have been remarkable. But along with other countries of the Western Balkans, the citizens and government of Bosnia-Herzegovina have committed themselves irrevocably to a European perspective and to pursuing their goal to become members of the European Union. As a long-standing advocate of enlargement, Ireland remains committed to doing all it can, in close collaboration with our EU partners, to help Bosnia-Herzegovina and the other Western Balkans countries along their European path. We do this in the simple belief that offering the prospect of EU membership to all those countries who aspire to join and who fulfill the necessary criteria represents the best way of promoting peace, stability and prosperity in a region which represents an integral and cherished part of Europe. As a Security Council member, Ireland will work hard to ensure that the United Nations continues to accompany and offer its full support to Bosnia-Herzegovina in consolidating the hard-gained peace which has flowed from the Dayton Accords. This must continue to be a priority for all of us in the international community. Today, therefore, is a day for bowing our heads in remembrance for standing with all the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and for committing to a better future. We are proud to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to apologize. Ambassador Heusken had to step out for a minute. He will be back later. I thank you very much, Minister Byrne of Ireland. And I would now like to give the floor to Belgium, to the Deputy Permanent Representative, Mr. Jerome Corman.
Thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, this marks the 25th anniversary. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica, reminding us of the worst atrocity committed on European soil since World War II. 25 years later, many family members continue their search for the remains of their loved ones. Today, we commemorate all victims and we share in the grief of the affected families and communities. Today also offers an opportunity to draw lessons from the events. Firstly, the genocide in Srebrenica is a stark reminder of our collective failure to act, despite the many warning signs, and the failure of the international community to adequately respond to mass atrocities committed in Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia during the 1990s. UN member states agreed in 2005 to the development of the principle of responsibility to protect. Governments committed to take appropriate action to protect their populations from atrocity crimes and recognized a specific role for the international community and the Security Council in some circumstances. Belgium has welcomed in this respect the ACT initiative on Security Council action against genocide, crimes against humanity or war crimes. We have to admit, however, that adequate progress on reforms guaranteeing preventive United Nations Security Council action has not materialized. Unfortunately, still today, too often, we lack the political will to translate early warning into early action. Prevention must be at the core of our efforts as an international community. Secondly, I would like to stress the importance of truth, accountability, and justice as a cornerstone of reconciliation. The path towards reconciliation in Bosnia-Herzegovina has been a challenging one. The work of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals, and the International Commission on Missing Persons has been crucial in the truth-speaking process. However, the denial of genocide and war crimes, as well as the glorification of convicted war criminals, continue. This not only undermines all efforts at reconciliation, but also unnecessarily adds to the grief of survivors. This is unacceptable and it must stop in Bosnia and elsewhere. To fight against these practices, Belgium adopted legislation against denial, gross minimization, justification, or approval of genocides, crimes against humanity, or war crimes recognized as such by an international tribunal. True reconciliation is only possible if concrete steps are taken to fight impunity by ensuring the prosecution of war criminals and bringing truth about victims' fate to light. Victims and survivors must be at the center of these efforts. Their rights must be guaranteed, as well as their meaningful participation in efforts to achieve reconciliation. We should pay particular attention to the voice and experience of children who had to grow up without their fathers. Survivors deserve the truth, justice, and reparations for the crimes committed against their family members. Excellencies, colleagues, 25 years after the genocide in Srebrenica, Bosnia and Herzegovina has emerged as an independent, sovereign, and multi-community state on a path towards Euro-Atlantic integration. It has made a strategic choice for peace. It aspires to be a member of the European Union, a community built on shared values and peace. As an EU member, Belgium stands ready to further support Bosnia and Herzegovina on this path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to give the floor to the Netherlands. Ambassador Karel van Oosterom, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me first express our deep appreciation for Germany for organizing this important session. Tomorrow we pay tribute to the 25th commemoration of the genocide in Srebrenica. It was the worst atrocity in European history since the end of the Second World War. More than 8,000 boys and men were killed. Innocent lives were lost. The grief over their loss will forever endure for their wives, mothers, children, brothers, sisters, other family members and friends. The sad truth is that we cannot change history. We cannot change that the international community was unable to protect a vulnerable population from extreme aggression and cruelty. It is a responsibility that weighs heavily upon all of us. We can't free the people of Srebrenica from grief, but we can and we must remember. And we can and we must ensure that such an atrocity never happens again. So we speak out wherever we can against polarizing language, glorification of war criminals, and genocide denial. We work to advance reconciliation, and we work to ensure that those responsible for the genocide are tried and convicted. The atrocity that occurred 25 years ago must never be forgotten, neither by our generation nor the next. Peace, we have learned, can be fragile and can be never taken for granted. Once it is disrupted, restoring it may come at a great cost. Therefore, we must renew our commitment to peace every day. We stand side by side with the survivors who will carry the pain and grief with them for the rest of their lives. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next, I would like to give the floor to Estonia. Ambassador Sven Jørgensen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Estonia stands in solidarity with the Bosnian people. Our thoughts are with the victims and their families. Today's commemoration gives us once more a reason to reflect on the basic principle that the United Nations is based on, and that is enshrined in the UN Charter. That is to maintain international peace and security. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Court of Justice have concluded that the acts committed in Srebrenica constituted genocide. Denial of these horrific events as genocide, contesting the established legal practice of the international tribunals, and glorification of convicted war criminals in any form or manifestation does not contribute to reconciliation. Under the principle of responsibility to protect, adopted 15 years ago, it is up to states to protect their own populations from war crimes and crimes against humanity. It also requires the international community to step in if this obligation is not met. Estonia strongly supports the French-Mexican proposal of voluntary restraining the use of veto powers in the Security Council in situations involving mass atrocity crimes. Estonia is also committed to and strongly advocates for adherence to the code of conduct that includes refraining from vetoing and also refers to the need to make timely and decisive action if mass atrocity crime is being committed. Madam President, violence is fueled by inaction of onlookers, providing the perpetrators with an emboldened sense of impunity. Injustice and impunity have proven in the past to be the main obstacles to healing deep wounds in societies caused by the most serious crimes and could create fertile ground for the recurrence of conflict. We stress the importance of respecting the principles of international law, human rights, rule of law, full acceptance and implementation of the practice of ICJ and ICTY, and full cooperation with the international residual mechanism for criminal tribunals to overcome the tragedies of the past and move towards reconciliation and mutual trust in society. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next, I would like to give the floor to the European Union. Ambassador Olof Skog, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and a special greeting to Ambassador Christoph Heusgen for his strong commitment and his initiative, I would say, of commemorating today Srebrenica, and we are proud co-sponsors of this event as the European Union. We are here today to remember Srebrenica, one of the darkest pages of our modern European history. We pay tribute to the women of Srebrenica who lost their sons and husbands, and we're here to honor all the victims and all those still missing. In July 1995, over 8,000 boys and men were systematically murdered in a town in which they thought they were safe. Tragic events took place in the depths of the war that had swept across Bosnia and Herzegovina from 1992 to 1995, and which took the lives of around 100,000 victims all over the country. The Srebrenica genocide is still an open wound at the heart of Europe. This atrocity continues to haunt us and reminds us of our shared responsibility to prevent genocide from ever happening again in Europe and all over the world. Today reminds us of the fragility of peace and the importance of supporting societal forces that bridge divides, bind communities together, and support those in pain. We should not look away from Srebrenica, but rather look at it courageously and without blinking, acknowledging the facts and the lessons it brings. Only by doing so can we overcome its tragic legacy. The message I want to pass today is dedicated to political leaders in the region. Reconciliation has unfortunately stalled over the past years, and we have seen a resurgence in glorification of war criminals, in inflammatory, denial, and revisionist rhetoric. Srebrenica calls for accountability, not just for Srebrenica, but it's an important call for accountability across the world. Justice must be served, and all those responsible for the massacre of Srebrenica must face the consequences of their actions. 25 years after, it is more urgent than ever to end impunity for the perpetrators of war crimes. The massacre was recognized as an act of genocide by international courts. These are the established facts about what happened, which should today be clear to all. 25 years after Srebrenica and the end of the war in Bosnia, Herzegovina, something needs to change. All political leaders in the Western Balkans must measure the importance of that day. Take time to look back and seize the opportunity to take decisive steps to bring their citizens together around a common vision for the future built on trust, mutual understanding, and respect for one another. Leaders of the region must take full ownership of this courageous path and lead by example, making reconciliation a reality that citizens experience every day, simply because it is the future of the next generations that is at stake. The European Union project is, in its essence, a peace project aimed at overcoming the divisions and tragedies of the past. it is also about building prosperous societies and strong democracies. Integrating the Western Balkans is an essential part of this project. The European Union is not complete without Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Western Balkans. So we will continue to support Bosnia and Herzegovina to advance on its European path, establishing a society where pluralism, justice, and human dignity prevail. While remembering what happened in Srebrenica, the European Union stands by the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Western Balkans as a whole. We are deeply and strongly committed to doing our part to build a brighter future together, in which atrocities are made impossible and become inconceivable. I thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Next, I would like to give the floor to the United Kingdom, Deputy Permanent Representative, Mr. James Roscoe. You have the floor.
Thank you and good morning. The United Kingdom is honoured to co-sponsor this event in commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica. I would like to begin by thanking the President of the General Assembly, the Special Advisor of the Secretary-General on the Prevention of Genocide, and the Director of the War Childhood Museum for their insightful briefings today. Tomorrow, as we mark the 25th anniversary of the genocide, the world will mourn the victims of Srebrenica. While we remember those who lost their lives, our thoughts are also with their families who have endured unimaginable suffering. We will also think of their strength and bravery in the fight for justice. The UK will continue to stand with them. Just 50 years after the horrors of the Holocaust, and 50 years after the founding of the UN, whose purpose it was to stop such heinous acts ever happening again, our fellow Europeans endured a genocide. Over 8,000 mainly Muslim men and boys lost their lives, and tens of thousands more were forcibly expelled from their homes. We owe it to the victims and their families always to remember what happened in Srebrenica. We must reflect and learn from these events to ensure similar crimes never happen again. On the 15th anniversary of the responsibility to protect, the commitment endorsed by all UN member states in 2005 to protect populations from genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and ethnic cleansing, the lessons for the UN remain as relevant today as they were 25 years ago. In this year of important anniversaries, we must remember victims on all sides of the conflicts of the 1990s. People from across the region are still living in divided communities. They are still missing loved ones, and they are still pursuing justice. It is gravely concerning that revisionist rhetoric is still so prevalent. Individuals often distort established facts, including through the denial of war crimes and other atrocity crimes for their own gain. We owe it to the victims to be clear. What took place at Srebrenica was a genocide. The United Kingdom stands by the verdicts of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Court of Justice in this definition. And we also stand by the personal stories and memories of the victims that Amina Kravac spoke to earlier. Overcoming the legacies of the past is vital for countries in the region. It was a pivotal moment when leaders of the Western Balkans Summit in London in 2018 signed 3 landmark joint declarations, underlining the importance of identifying the missing, bringing perpetrators to justice, rejecting hate speech and the glorification of war criminals, while promoting a culture of respect and solidarity with all victims. Western Balkan leaders also agreed that verdicts from the international and domestic courts must be respected. The UK is proud to support the reconciliation agenda in the Western Balkans, politically and practically, and we will continue to do so. There are also lessons for us as the UN family. We should mark here the important role the UN has played through the ICTY and its residual mechanism in fighting to end impunity. The verdicts of genocide against Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic, showed the international community can succeed, even if it takes time, in delivering justice. And as we also heard from Amina, this justice is critical to the victims for closure at both the individual and national level. And as we pause to reflect and learn from the events of Srebrenica, we are reminded of the necessity to resource and mandate peacekeeping missions effectively to ensure such loss of life never occurs again. The scars of Srebrenica will always be present, but we must support those who seek to heal the wounds of the past. We owe it to all those who lost their lives in the conflicts to work together to help build a safe and prosperous future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on my speakers list is Slovenia. Ambassador Darja Bavdas-Kuret, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and I would like to express my thanks to my German colleague for organizing this very important event. 11th of July, Srebrenica Memorial Day, is a day to revive and keep alive the memory of the victims of genocide in Srebrenica, but also atrocities during the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is also a reminder that we must not allow such tragedies of genocide to be repeated ever again. Srebrenica will not and should not be forgotten. Everyone should take a firm stand without any reservations against the ones who denies that genocide happened. Full recognition of the past, full acceptance and implementation of the rulings and decisions of international courts are the basis for lasting reconciliation and helps survivors of this tragedy of genocide to cope with the pain and grief. Excellencies, an effective prosecution by the independent criminal court is a means to put an end to impunity and to contribute to prevention of such crimes. It also protects the rights of victims. Enhanced international cooperation and respect for the rule of law on the international and national levels have an indispensable role in maintenance of international peace and security, human rights, and development. Turning to the best practices, let me mention that Bosnia and Herzegovina is still one of the most mine-contaminated countries in the world and remains the most mine-affected country in Europe. Since 1998, the ITF, Enhancing Human Security, humanitarian and non-profit organization established by the government of Republic of Slovenia, in totally demined and released more than 90 million square meters of land in Bosnia and Herzegovina. ITF also provides victims assistance, capacity building, and mine risk education in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There are many good projects, but ITF in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I would like to really point one out, the ongoing project, School and Peer Mediation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The overall objective of the project is to build mediating capacities in schools between employees, professors, and pupils so that schools become promoters of reconciliation, tolerance, and human rights, and peaceful resolutions of conflicts, which would enable a path towards lasting peace through education. The project targets educational institutions on the level of Republika Srpska, Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Brčko district. Excellencies, let me conclude by saying that 25th commemoration of Srebrenica genocide is also an opportunity to further foster reconciliation and cooperation, which is essential to the efforts of all countries in the region for the European integration, the biggest the biggest peace project in Europe ever. I thank you.
I thank you, Ambassador. Next, I would like to give the floor to the permanent representative of Serbia, Ambassador Milan Milanovich. You have the floor. Sorry, we can't hear you. Please unmute yourself.
Okay now?
Yes, now it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. Special Advisor to the Secretary General, Your Excellency, Ambassador Huizgen, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Serbia condemns strongly and unequivocally the crimes committed against the Bosniak population of Srebrenica 25 years ago and expresses its profound regret and respect for the victims. The memory of those lost in the brutal armed conflicts in the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s must never fade away, and the crimes they fell prey to must not happen ever again. It is a moral debt to each and every victim, as well as sacred duty to make sure that perpetrators of these crimes are brought to justice and punished. Fight against impunity in one of the main principles of the contemporary legal order. We therefore believe that only by shedding light on the crimes committed during armed conflicts in the territory of the former Yugoslavia and by prosecuting their perpetrators, we can achieve lasting reconciliation in the region. Esteemed colleagues, Serbia continues to be firmly committed to the promotion of good neighborly relations aimed at overcoming the negative legacy of the past and building a common future. Despite the fact that our perceptions of the tragic events of the 1990s are different, we should look to the future, continue the process of regional reconciliation, and improve the conditions for our citizens to live together on the basis of equality of peoples and full respect for human and minority rights and freedoms. My country will continue to work tirelessly and wholeheartedly on strengthening cooperation in the region, promoting thus its economic progress and social development to the benefit of all. It attaches great importance to furthering cooperation with Bosnia and Herzegovina, aimed to achieving progress in multiple areas of mutual interest. It is exactly with this goal in mind, allow me to remind you, that the government of the Republic of Serbia donated 5 million euros to the municipality of Srebrenica for development projects in 2015 and 1 million euro to the industrial zone of Potocari in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, unfortunately, 25 long years later, we cannot bring back to life the victims of war and destruction. What we can do, though, and what is important to do for our common future, is to condemn all crimes and bring their perpetrators to justice. We can keep alive the memory of and feel for every victim, irrespective of its ethnic, religious, or other background, and embark on the road of lasting reconciliation, economic and political stability, and common prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor now to the permanent representative of Croatia, Ambassador Ivan Simonovic. You have the floor.
Yeah, dear organizers, President of the General Assembly, dear colleagues. 25 years have passed since genocide was committed in Srebrenica in July 1995. This commemoration is as much about what happened in Srebrenica in 1995 as it is about how we cope with this tragedy today, how we honor the victims, how we pay tribute to them, and above all, what do we do to make sure that such a tragedy never happens again? When we talk about the tragedy in Srebrenica today, let us bear in mind the warning words of Primo Levi on Holocaust. It happened, therefore it can happen again. It can happen, and it can happen anywhere. The repeating of our pledge, never again, is therefore not enough. We need a more effective preventive action, and we need to learn from the tragedy of Srebrenica. It has to be stated clearly and acknowledged by all. What happened in Srebrenica was an act of genocide, as was established by both the ICJ and ICTY. Otherwise, as Primo Levi warns us, it could happen again. Denial of genocide has a detrimental effect on the regional reconciliation, cooperation, and good neighborly relations. A part of genocide in Srebrenica, a great number of other atrocity crimes have also been committed during the conflict in former Yugoslavia. Only accepting the truth and establishing justice can lead to true reconciliation. The countries of the region need reconciliation, the sooner the better, and they need to speed up their moving towards common European future. We welcome the residual mechanisms appeals chamber final judgment against Radovan Karadzic, the main ideologist of the policy of brutal ethnic cleansing in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We are calling on the residual mechanism to speed up its proceedings in the appeal case against Ratko Mladic, the main executioner of the policy of ethnic cleansing, in order not to deprive victims and their families from the final judgment, as it unfortunately happened in the Milosevic case. It is hugely important for the residual mechanism to finalize impartial establishment of facts and responsibility, helping to build reliable historical record of the Srebrenica tragedy. Equally important is to establish the fate of missing persons in Srebrenica and elsewhere, to identify their mortal remains and provide them with dignified burial, thus helping to bring closure to the families, including many of them in Croatia. Only when justice is served, the fate of the missing is established and their mortal remains are decently buried, victims of Srebrenica and all other victims of atrocity crimes committed on the territory of former Yugoslavia may finally rest in peace. Co-chairs, Croatia can feel the pain of Srebrenica's mothers. In Croatia, when you say Vukovar or Škabrnja, these are not merely the names of towns. They are symbols of suffering and a painful reminder of the victims of atrocity crimes. After capture of Vukovar in 1991, terrible war crimes were committed, including the mass execution of wounded and captured civilians and Croatian soldiers taken straight from the hospital to the execution. The genocide in Srebrenica happened almost 4 years after the Vukovar massacre. If the lessons from the Vukovar tragedy had been learned in time, maybe the horrors of Srebrenica could have been avoided through the timely and decisive collective preventive action by the international community. It is our duty to learn from these events and recognize early signs of the increase of atrocity crimes risks and to prevent them from occurring. Therefore, we should provide stronger backing to atrocity crimes prevention activities of the Secretary General's Special Advisor on the prevention of genocide and on the responsibility to protect, the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the International Criminal Court. The commitment to responsibility to protect, born out of horrors of Vukovar, Rwanda, and Srebrenica 15 years ago, should be more effectively implemented in practice. Ladies and gentlemen, no one can bring back thousands of lives lost in Srebrenica, but at least we have to show that their sufferings have not been forgotten and that their families' pain is the pain of all humanity. This pain should strengthen our commitment and incite our more timely and decisive actions to prevent atrocity crimes, especially genocide. Remembrance and dignity, as well as improved prevention, are what we owe to victims of genocide in Srebrenica and to victims all over the world. Let us remember Levi's warning. It is not enough to hope that genocide will not happen again. We must prevent it from happening again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Next, I would like to give the floor to the permanent representative of Montenegro, Ambassador Milica Pejanović-Jurisic. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first of all to thank the permanent missions of Germany, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Estonia, France, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and the delegation of the European Union for organizing this important event and commemorating the 25th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica, the worst atrocity committed in Europe since the Second World War. In July 2009, Montenegro was among the first countries from the region to adopt the declaration on accepting the European Parliament's resolution on Srebrenica, condemning the Srebrenica genocide and other atrocities committed during the conflict in former Yugoslavia from 1991 to 2001. It is our deep belief that as a country and as a society, we are bound to treat the sacrifice of all victims to the Srebrenica genocide with great reverence. For that reason, we will continue to contribute in preserving the memory of the victims of this horrific crime as a lasting reminder to all present and future generations in our region. In doing so, we firmly believe that we can strengthen policies aimed at ensuring the terrible mistakes of our past are never to be repeated. Our collective duty is to keep shedding light on this genocide and to never forget those who lost their lives in Srebrenica and other conflict-afflicted areas of former Yugoslavia. 25 years later, despite conclusive evidence and the rulings of the world's most esteemed international courts, the culture of denial of those egregious acts still persists, while in some instances, its perpetrators continue to be glorified. This magnifies the suffering of survivors and victims' families, while questioning the future of peace and true coexistence not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in the region as a whole. The compassion towards the victims and their loved ones does not weaken with the passage of time. Therefore, there is an ever so clear need of constant reminder of the responsibility for the committed crimes. Our persistent efforts for good neighborly relations, peace and stability should undoubtedly be a long-term commitment of all policymakers in the region. Only in this way we can follow the path of transitional justice that leads to genuine reconciliation, which is essential for a better future of the generations to come. There is no true healing without the knowledge of what happened to us and those around us. And there is no moving forward without speaking out about the genocide. Survivors and victims of Srebrenica must not be forgotten, and we must take intentional action to keep remembering each of the more than 8,000 lost lives. Only then we will honor their existence in this world and the meaning of their ultimate sacrifice. I thank you.
Next, I would like to give the floor to the permanent representative of the Ukraine, Mr. Ambassador Sergey Kuznetsov.
Thank you. I would like to thank sponsoring states for organizing this commemoration and opportunity to express solidarity with all the families and friends of those whose lives were taken as Srebrenica massacre 25 years ago. As members of the international community, we are also here to confirm that we learned this tragic lesson and that such terrible events will never occur again. Ukraine feels the pain of those who suffered, not least because we know firsthand what the genocide is, because of acts of genocide committed by Stalin regime of the Soviet Union against Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars. I'm confident that in order to prevent such atrocities in the future, we must look honestly at the past, acknowledge the fact that these crimes occurred. Only by fully acknowledging the past can we achieve a future of true and lasting reconciliation. 25 years have passed since the tragic events in Srebrenica, but even today, the international community doesn't have the unity in order to accept the fact of proven crimes as established by the courts. As you may recall, back in 2015, a non-elected member of the Security Council, once again misusing its veto right, blocked the Security Council's draft resolution on Srebrenica. Taking this opportunity, I would also like to express my hope that the difficult task of building trust to allow for full reconciliation in Bosnia and Herzegovina would be accomplished for the sake of a better future of this country in sustainable peace, justice, and dignity for all. And I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next, I would like to give the floor to the permanent representative of Poland, Ambassador Joanna Bonecka. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I would like to thank the co-organizers for this important initiative. Madam President, the genocide of more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys committed in Srebrenica, it's a pitch dark part of our European history. Srebrenica will forever remain yet another symbol of the fall of humanity and of the helplessness of the international community. When the world first heard about the atrocities in the former Yugoslavia, the United Nations Human Rights Commission appointed as its special rapporteur the first post-communist Prime Minister of Poland, Mr. Tadeusz Mazowiecki. He wrote 18 reports alarming the public opinion about crimes against civilians committed in Bosnia and Herzegovina. After the massacre in Srebrenica, he decided to visit the refugee camp at Tuzla. Despite being advised against doing so for security reasons, he represented the UN, an organization which failed in its task of protecting innocent men, women, and children in Srebrenica. Nevertheless, he decided to face the wives, mothers, and sisters of the victims and face the responsibility. The day after his return from Tuzla, Mazowiecki decided, in an act of powerlessness in the face of inaction of international community, to resign from his function. I represent a nation for whom no one wanted to die in 1939. We won't die for dancing, they said. Are we allowed today to say that we won't die for Rzepa, Sarajevo? He asked rhetorically. The President of the Republic of Poland, Mr. Andrzej Duda, has sent a few days ago a letter to the Chairman of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mr. Šefik Džaferović, in which he emphasized that Poles, as the first victims of Nazi Germany during World War II, and a nation that has suffered unspeakable atrocity during the conflict from both of its occupiers, understands the grief and feels deep sympathy with the people of Srebrenica and of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In his letter, President Duda highlighted the fact that remembrance should go hand in hand with forgiveness, provided that it is based on the foundation of historical truth. We forgive and ask for forgiveness. These famous words contained in the letter of Polish bishops to their German counterparts in 1965 became a milestone in the history of Polish-German reconciliation. Today, the Polish-German friendship allows us to work closely together for the good of our nations and for the European project. It also shows that it is possible to forgive without forgetting. Today, we bow our heads before the victims of Srebrenica, hoping that this unspeakable crime will be, for the sake of future generations, forgiven but not forgotten. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to give the floor to Sweden. Deputy Permanent Representative Magnus Lennartsson, you have the floor.
Thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for this important event. Today, we express our solidarity with the victims of the genocide in Srebrenica in 1995 and with the survivors and families who grieve for their loved ones. There is no place for the denial of the horrible crimes committed during the conflicts in the Balkans during the 1990s, nor for the glorification of individuals who have been found guilty of such crimes. Attempts to politicize the events in Srebrenica are unacceptable. It is the Swedish government's firm view that all acts and statements that diminish or deny the genocide are deeply disturbing and contrary to the fundamental global values. To bring the perpetrators to justice is an essential component to rebuild trust and foster reconciliation. Efforts to that respect at both national and international levels must continue. We commend the work of the International Residual Mechanism for the Criminal Tribunals and the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. The legacy of the ICTY has shown that those suspected of bearing the greatest responsibility for atrocities committed can be called into account. We cannot overestimate the role that these and other international criminal tribunals have played in the fight against impunity for the most horrendous crimes, such as genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. To achieve results, cooperation with the mechanism remains of utmost importance. We will continue to support those working hard to trying to find the truth and to bring justice, including by identifying and locating those who were killed. Sweden will also continue to work closely with those who are making efforts to achieve lasting reconciliation. Today is also an occasion to look to the future and commit to continue the work for a prosperous future of Bosnia and Herzegovina and its people, as well as the whole region. On the global level, we must continue to strengthen the United Nations, which remains the backbone of the international system. Strong support for the United Nations has always been and will continue to be a cornerstone in Sweden's foreign policy. We have made efforts to learn from our mistakes. The UN has adopted the principle of responsibility to protect. Since 2005, the principle has been invoked and applied several times. The UN peacekeeping mandates are today more distinct and explicit regarding protection of civilians. The UN must have the tools and resources to act if needed. As our thoughts today go out to the victims and the survivors, we must all commit to learn and take action to make sure genocides and other mass atrocity crimes never happen again. Thank you.
I thank you. I would now like to give the floor to Argentina, Chargé d'Affaires, Mr. Alejandro Verdier. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all organizers of this event. At least 100,000 dead, 2 million refugees, an international community hesitant for too long, and a society destroyed by the genocide. This is the legacy that the war in Bosnia leaves for history. No society is safe from suffering a massive atrocity. Srebrenica is a scream that continues to stand. It is a call to strengthen all international bodies dedicated to alerting and mobilizing the international community whenever processes capable of unleashing massive violence against the population emerge. In this sense, the United Nations Office for the prevention of genocides must be strongly supported by member states in order to carry out the objectives entrusted to them. Unfortunately, Argentina integrates the list of countries in which massive atrocities have been committed during the 20th century. We know the pain of loss and the need for memory, truth, and justice as the only way for societies to recover and move forward. That is the reason why, for the first day, we have supported all the UN initiatives aimed at fighting impunity for the crimes committed in the former Yugoslavia. From the work carried out by the courts, from the testimonies of the victims and their survivors, from the documentation presented, and from the initiatives carried out to learn the truth and impart justice, we have learned that in order to prevent tragedies like the one in Srebrenica, there must be a determined early prevention policy. Not only because it is our responsibility, but because we have the tools to prevent, and we have to remain firm in that determination. These are the most important lessons that we should not forget. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to give the floor to Turkey, Deputy Permanent Representative, Ms. Birgit Kocaer. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I would also like to wholeheartedly thank the organizers of this meeting and express our appreciation to the distinguished briefers this morning. Today, we commemorate the 25th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica, the most horrific atrocity that took place in Europe since the Holocaust. We honor with respect the memory of more than 8,000 victims of Srebrenica and offer our condolences to their families and loved ones. Feeling this grief as our own, we have always taken part in and supported this commemoration. Turkey is represented at the highest level in the ceremonies held in Bosnia and Herzegovina every year. Additionally, last year, we supported the holding of the first ever commemoration of this genocide at the Council of Europe. As already mentioned earlier at this meeting, remembering and raising awareness is key to non-recurrence. At the same time, our commitments to support the efforts at all levels to ensure accountability for the crimes committed during this painful chapter of the 90s remains firm. In this vein, Turkey fully supports the work of the International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals, including by providing assistance to the information center established in Sarajevo in 2018. We are also proud to have a highly qualified national serving as a judge in this legal body. The important work of the residual mechanism is a reminder that there will be no impunity for those who commit such horrific crimes. It is also essential for the international community to redouble its efforts to prevent the occurrence of such crimes. To that end, constructive dialogue and prevention efforts are key. Turkey pioneers mediation efforts not only in the UN, but also in other organizations such as the OSCE and OIC, as well as through bilateral and trilateral initiatives. As a founder and co-chair of the Alliance of Civilizations, we would also like to point out the pertinent work undertaken by this initiative as well. We also would like to emphasize that when efforts for prevention do not bear fruit, the United Nations, with its organs and mechanisms, including the Security Council, must remain ready to assume its responsibilities as enshrined in the Charter. The genocide in Srebrenica is a haunting reminder of this necessity. It is clear that civilians are the ones to pay the highest price when member states fail to uphold their responsibility to protect. Decades after the international community's call for never again and the adoption of the landmark Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, the genocides in Rwanda and Srebrenica revealed a stark gap between our commitments and actions. Today, as the most serious international crimes continue to be committed in various parts of the world, and as intolerance, racism, xenophobia, hate speech, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia are on the rise, living up to our commitments and responsibilities and closing this gap is more crucial than ever. The tragic events of the past remind us of the need to work in unity for a better future in a stable, prosperous, and inclusive manner. Turkey commends Bosnia and Herzegovina and neighboring countries for their ongoing efforts to put these principles into practice. We remain committed to support them in their pursuit of overcoming the legacy of past conflict by seeking justice, reconciliation, as well as peace, prosperity, and stability in the region. Thank you.
I thank you. I would now like to give the floor to Italy, the Deputy Permanent Representative, Mr. Stefano Stefanile. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, before the tragic events in Srebrenica, Europe hoped that it had left the worst atrocities behind to the memory of its elderly and to the history books. But after Srebrenica, we found ourselves brutally conscious that history can repeat itself even in the heart of Europe. Today, we mourn the victims of those painful events. We stand close to those who lost their loved ones and to the many families still waiting to find out the truth about their missing relatives. After 25 years, the silence on their whereabouts must be broken, and the accountability of the perpetrators of those crimes must be pursued. Srebrenica speaks not only about our past, but also about our future. We must learn from it to prevent these atrocities from happening again and to build upon the ruins and the deep divisions they left behind. A quarter of a century after Srebrenica and the Dayton agreements, there is still the need to talk about and to work for reconciliation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as across the Western Balkans region. Reconciliation comes, first of all, through the knowledge of the truth, a goal pursued with determination by the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, that 16 years ago first determined that the genocide had been committed in Srebrenica. It is only through the establishment of the truth, respect for all victims, and an open dialogue that social cohesion and reconciliation can be fully achieved. We invite all political leaders in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as in the region, to work together with a future-oriented attitude by countering hate speech and incitement to violence, as well as by fully recognizing women's role in leadership and decision-making. We call on them to set aside their divisions and start building bridges and trust in the country's best interest, and especially for the youngest generations. The future for Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as for all the Western Balkans countries, clearly lies in Europe. Italy will continue to stand by Bosnia and Herzegovina's side in its march towards the European Union. Advancing towards EU membership comes through reforms, but also and foremost through reconciliation. Only by working hand in hand will it be possible for Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Western Balkans to make peace with the painful legacy of the past and to build a peaceful future where the whole region will be finally reunited to Europe. I thank you.
I thank Stefano Stefanide for his contribution and now give the floor to Dominique Favre, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland. Dominique, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christoph. Thank you to all the organizers of today's commemoration for bringing us all together to remember and honor all Srebrenica victims, those who were killed, those who were raped, and those who were forcibly displaced. This day reminds us of our collective responsibility to prevent the recurrence of such a horrific act and to support the reconciliation process. To this day, efforts to provide justice, truth, and reparations to the victims and survivors of Srebrenica are incomplete. To recognize the injustice and the suffering of the victims on all sides is also to recognize the need to hold the perpetrators of these crimes accountable. Every commitment to continue on this path must therefore be encouraged. Legacies of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleanings, and other mass atrocities need to be addressed comprehensively, persistently, and courageously, and always with the purpose of fostering sustainable peace. There is a wide range of measures, judicial and non-judicial, that help societies and the international community in dealing with the past. It is crucial that we use them. 25 years have passed, but the sadness, horror, and consequences of those appalling atrocities are still felt today. While we remember the past, it is equally important to cherish the present by encouraging diversity, not division, and by promoting the rule of law within a democratic framework and keeping up efforts to build inclusive, just, and peaceful societies in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in the wider region of the Western Balkans. Thank you very much, Christoph.
I thank Dominic Faber for his statement, and I now give the floor to the Ambassador of France, Nicolas de Rivière. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Do you hear me? Okay. 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 Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. President of Bosnia Herzegovina, and honorable ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the President of the General Assembly, the Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide, and the Director of the War Childhood Museums in Bosnia and Herzegovina for their insightful presentations. 25 years ago, Europe went through its darkest hours since the end of the Second World War. We will always remember the 8,000 men and boys who were murdered in Srebrenica in July 1995. France greets with emotions the survivors of this genocide as well as the families of the victims. Srebrenica remains a painful symbol of our collective failure to protect civilians from mass atrocities. This has left a particular imprint on the United Nations, which has worked tirelessly to be up to its responsibility to protect civilians. We now have better tools. We have given strong mandates to peacekeeping operations. Their performance should be assessed on their capacity to protect civilians. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, whose contribution to peace and stability in the Balkans has been key and whose heritage has to be preserved, paved the way for the International Criminal Court. It is now a pillar of the fight against impunity at the international level. We call on all states to ratify the Rome Statute of the ICC and to support its independence. We have a special advisor who regularly sounds the alert on specific situations when states are complacent or inactive. In this regard, we recall that the primary responsibility to protect civilians, promote human rights, and bring justice to victims lies with states, associations of victims, religious leaders, local leadership, judicial authorities, academics have a key role to play to enable societies to cope with their past and build their future. 25 years after Srebrenica, much remains to be done for harmonious coexistence of communities of Bosnia and Herzegovina and in the Western Balkan region, still marked by the stigma of the conflict of the 1990s. The past in its entirety must be fully recognized by all. There can be no room for any form of negationism, historical revisionism, or glorification of war criminals convicted by courts. Regional organizations such as the European Union have a role to play in supporting efforts towards peace, justice, reconciliation between people, freedom, and democracy. Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Western Balkans have chosen these values by taking the path of the integration into the European Union. The reconciliation between France and Germany can, I believe, serve as an inspiration. Just today, a summit between Serbia and Kosovo, organized by the President of France and the Chancellor of Germany, is paving the way for further progress along this path. Through the Western Balkans, the work to reconcile communities will help to build a future of peace and prosperity in a united Europe. We share a common European future. I reaffirm France's conviction regarding the European perspective of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Western Balkans on the basis of the necessary reforms in the fields of economic and social development, rule of law, democratic functioning, and human rights. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Nicolas. I thank the permanent representative of France, Mr. Nicolas de Rivière, for his statement. And now, as the final speaker, it's a pleasure to give the floor to the ambassador of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mr. Sven Alkalai. Sven, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the name of Bosnia and Herzegovina, I would like to thank everyone who has joined us from around the world today. We have convened to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Srebrenica genocide, the worst mass murder in Europe since World War II. I speak before you as a Bosnian official, but also as a member of Sarajevo Jewish community. As we reflect upon this blood on the world's conscience and the pause to remember each of 8,372 innocent victims who were so brutally executed, we must also renew the commitment that we made after Srebrenica and after the Holocaust, never again. In Bosnia and Herzegovina today, the Srebrenica genocide and other war crimes are actively denied. This inflicts further suffering upon the victims and their survivors. For the sake of remembrance, justice, and reconciliation, my government and people demand a law criminalizing the denial of genocide. Genocide deniers must be prevented from spreading further hatred and lying with impunity. All remaining war criminals must be prosecuted. War criminals must no longer be glorified as a national hero. To ensure that my country never again suffers from genocide and other war crimes, I call upon all world leaders to redouble their efforts to acknowledge the crimes of Srebrenica and ensure that my country is restored as a fully functional, stable, and unified state. Mr. President, reconciliation is essential for Bosnia and Herzegovina for a future, but it's possible only when justice has been achieved. In turn, genuine peace can follow reconciliation only when we make it impossible to repeat the mistakes of the past. In the name of peace and justice, and in memory of the 8,372 innocent civilians whose lives were commemorated today, I implore you to join me in working towards a better tomorrow for Bosnia and Herzegovina and the world. I thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of today's commemoration. I would like to thank all the participants. I would like to thank all the speakers who gave their testimonies today in this commemoration. This commemoration served to keep alive the memory of the 8,000 men and boys who were brutally murdered in Srebrenica. But we heard from many of the statements also beyond the commemoration the will and the readiness and the drive for reconciliation. And we heard in so many statements the opposition to trends that go back to denial, to hate speech, to nationalism and populism. And we hope that this spirit, the spirit of the commemoration of Srebrenica, will go beyond today's event and will go beyond the main commemoration, which will take place tomorrow in the neighborhood of Srebrenica, and will go beyond in our daily lives. So again, thank you very much to the speakers, and thank you very much for the many people who followed today's speeches. Thank you.